Joining us now is Shaun Kenney. Shaun is the former executive director of the Republican Party of Virginia when it actually existed. Shaun, great to have you with us.
I'm glad to have me on. Thank you.
All right, Shaun, we got a lot to go over today, pipelines and stuff like that. That was kind of my opening, but we're going to agree to disagree probably. I don't get this ERA debate. I mean, why would you basically end the Republican Party as we know it in Virginia over a symbolic vote? Why would you do that?
Well, there's a certain interpretation of the ERA in states where it's been enacted where it enables equal access to things such as abortifacients. That's the reason why you're hearing the Family Foundation and other pro-life organizations oppose the ERA. Now, you can say, well, it's like, well, don't we already have that? It's like, well, yes, we do. The problem is that it's not exactly enshrined as a constitutional right. Roe v. Wade is pretty expansive, but the ERA sort of doubles down on that. So that's why you're hearing that complaint, that particular complaint, from pro-lifers. The flip side of that, of course, is that we've already kind of lost a lot of these battles, writ large, and that the ERA vote is really symbolic in Virginia. It's not going to have the force or effect of law. So the timeline for the ERA, there's about 95% consensus that it's passed, right? You can't resurrect this. So this is more of a, I don't know if you want to use like moral pointing or if you want to use, sort of like a victory lap that doesn't exist. But it's really, I mean, the opportunity to pass the ERA was in the late 70s, early 80s. That time has come and gone. This is great fundraising for the Democrats, but it's not an open issue at this rate. I mean, I think most observers are looking at this, scratching their heads, saying, "Well, I guess." I mean, it's a bit of a MacGuffin at this rate. It's like the Maltese Falcon. I mean, you get it, and then what happens? But again, at the end of the day, even if you have the symbolic vote, nothing really changes because you can't pass the ERA in Virginia anymore. So, that's kind of it in a nutshell. There's not a whole lot of magic to it.
We're going to get to the pipeline here in a minute. Shaun, how do the Republicans maintain control of the House of Delegates, right? They got a 51-49 majority. They only won that on basically a coin toss, or it would be split 50-50, right? They got all kinds of seats that they're going to get challenged on. They have a few they can pick up. It's going to be very, very close. But my contention is if the Democrats win this cycle, and I think they're going to win the state Senate, or certainly they're the favorite to do that, because Dick Black's seat is a long shot for the Republicans to maintain. Having said that, their last firewall is Kirk Cox in the House. If you were running the Republican Party of Virginia right now, what's left of it, what would be your strategy to save the House for the Republicans and for Kirk Cox?
Look, it's got to come down to bread and butter issues, right? I mean, it's the social issues that we continue to harp on. And believe me, I mean, you know me, John. I'm a pro-lifer. I'm a social conservative. I'm a practicing Catholic. These things are very important to me, and I know that they're important to a lot of Republicans that are listening. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that Virginia is a good place to start a business, is a good place to raise a family. It's a good place to work and raise kids and do all the things that are necessary to keep government out of our lives at the end of the day, to be self-sufficient. And at the end of the day, I don't think Republicans have really had a big idea to rally around since no car tax. I mean, if you look at it, this is the 25th anniversary of George Allen's inauguration as governor, which is a long shot bid to begin with. It broke the back of the old bird machine. But even he was able, with a Democratic General Assembly, to pass several key things that mattered to the wallets and public safety of Virginians. He was even able to go ahead and pass parental notification in Virginia. So, you get past the Allen administration into the Gilmore administration and no car tax. One really has to struggle to find the last time Republicans ran on something that galvanized the whole. I mean, certainly it wasn't going to be Corey Stewart waving little Confederate flags. Bob's Jobs kind of started that. But there really wasn't a big idea behind the McDonnell administration at the end of the day. It was just sort of a reaction against the Obama administration in 2008. Cuccinelli certainly didn't provide that. So you keep kind of pushing forward into these things, and what are we really doing that's addressing kitchen table issues? And opposing the ERA, okay, I mean that's one thing, I guess. You see the state Senate that's coming around with a $15 minimum wage. I mean, that's an easy one to get out and oppose. That's going to break the back of so many small businesses. But turning around, focusing on an education system that matters, getting ahead of the curve on automation, making sure that colleges and universities are affordable. I mean, Governor Allen and Governor Gilmore both had the courage to freeze tuition rates. That's something that's easy to get ahead of. You've got the UVA slush fund. That's $2.3 billion that they malappropriated from Commonwealth taxpayers. And there's been absolutely no serious push about getting out there and getting it back getting it back to work for Virginia taxpayers other than keeping it ensconced in Charlottesville. I mean, think of what you could do with that for roads, for STEM academies, for making sure that tuition stayed down, for actually training people for the automation economy that's coming around the curve, making sure that our energy prices are low, focusing on the Port of Virginia and making it an international port of call. There's all sorts of things we could be doing, John, but we're just not there because we're too afraid of protecting our flank. And if you're playing defense, you're not winning.
You just summed the whole thing up right there, Shaun Kenney. Maybe if we get new leadership, he outlined it. I mean, they need a vision. And look, here's what Kirk Cox did, right? First day before it opened, is he outlines a major tax incentive package to align your Virginia state taxes with the Trump tax cut. So you have choice. You can go either state taxes, you can either go itemization or straight deduction. They want to increase the deduction. They want to make it easier for you. They want you to save money. And when I was at the General Assembly on Friday, all the Democrats were arguing against it. And do you know what their argument was? It's too complicated to figure out. That was their argument. Like Virginians are really too stupid to figure out how to do their taxes and take advantage of it. That was their argument, except for Marston, who, to his credit, said it was a great idea. So, I mean, other than that, the others are servile and them saying, oh, it's too complicated. I mean, that's their argument. When you say a big idea is that you can get behind, Cox has nailed it. So, okay, let's go from there. I want to get to the pipeline. The Atlantic Coast Pipeline, Dominion Energy, showing the amount of money that is coming in opposing this now in the lawsuits. And we've got different companies being funded by this dark money that some people are tracing back to some pretty nefarious sources. I've got about 6 minutes. Can you outline where this money trail is for those that are opposing the pipeline? What is its genesis, Shaun Kenney?
Well, the genesis, of course, is to keep energy prices higher, so as to keep those with an interest in that in clover. I mean, so you go back and you look at opposition to other pipeline projects, Keystone XL, for instance, in North Dakota. You'll find that the individuals that oppose this are pretty much of the environmentalist set. But again, there's connections towards you look at their activity online. They tend to mimic a lot of the Russian the Internet Research Agency tactics that you saw employed, not necessarily in favor of Trump one way or the other, but it was more against Clinton. But you'll see it and also employed whenever there's an energy project in the United States that has the potential of lowering costs, because at the end of the day, the Russian government, along with the Venezuelans and others, rely on high energy prices to help fund whether it's their military or their pensions and things of this nature. So you get back to the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and the Mountain Valley Pipeline, and you'll see activity from the very same groups. If you look on Twitter, you'll find a lot of those very same accounts that were opposing Keystone XL or the same bots that ended up opposing the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and Mountain Valley Pipeline. When you look at the amount of money that's coming in, and you'll see these foundations that are funding these fake news agencies, like the Virginia Mercury, they're all funded from the same foundation, which have the same set of donors. These very same donors are the ones that are funding groups like Clean Virginia. Clean Virginia, of course, is making large donations to organizations like VPAP, who many people rely on for their morning news clips, which are heavily edited towards the left. All of this kind of comes around where if you start following the money trail, it starts leaning in one direction over another. And the pipeline, the trail for this isn't exactly a well-kept secret. House SST committee has already published a report saying that the Russians tend to fund environmentalist groups because they know that if they do so, they can drive the cost of energy up, and any incremental increase ultimately helps a petrostate. And that's really where the end game lies. I mean, people need to be very skeptical about all of this anti-Dominion or anti-pipeline talk Because at the end of the day, even though the supporters themselves may have genuine concerns, the people pulling the strings aren't necessarily being on the up and up as to why they're involved.
So let me get this straight. The objective of the dark money sources funding those that want to shut the Atlantic Coast Pipeline down, right? Their objective here is to keep energy prices high, because that's what this does. Tell me how that helps this group financially.
Well, the is when you start tracing it back to their key funders, one of them being Michael Bills themselves. He's the head of a $1.2 billion hedge fund. Who are those hedge fund managers? What's involved? We don't know. That's the real catch. Now, the flip side of this, of course, is when you start going back to House SST committee and some of the reports they've cranked out, they will tell you point blank that there are investors here in the United States and abroad that have an eye towards making sure that energy prices stay north of $80 a barrel for gasoline. The reason why is because that's what makes these petrostates like Venezuela and the Russian Federation profitable at the end of the day. That's what helps them fund their pension systems and everything else. And so the real question now is that you have two ends of the string. On one hand, you have Russian money financing anti-energy campaigns, dabbling in American politics and whatnot. On the other hand, you have this activity from environmentalist groups who share the very same objectives, but are getting their money from areas that we can't accurately trace because they're covered in layers of nonprofits and 501c3s and LLCs and things of this nature. And so you have to ask the question, who benefits at the end of the day? And the more investigation we do, I think we'll be able to shed more light on it and get better answers.
Well, here's the bottom line. The opposition to the pipeline is very hysterical, and it really has nothing to do, in my judgment right now, Shaun, Kenney, with any pipeline issue. It's got to do with any non-renewable sources of energy, period. They want sun and solar, and they'd rather go cold and hungry than ship gas through a pipeline. Because when you get to the natural gas issue, there's only three ways to get natural gas from its origin to people that need it, and that's a pipeline under the ground, a truck, or a train. That's it. Those are the only three ways to do it. Trucks overturn and have accidents. Trains go off the rails. There's never been a pipeline accident, to my knowledge, in the Commonwealth or anywhere in any of the surrounding states. Likely, you and I are standing on a pipeline. Shaun, we got a 50-50 chance of standing over one right now. This state is riddled with pipelines all over the place that have never had an accident. So it just doesn't make any sense. So those that oppose this, they just don't want any sources of energy, or they don't want it going through their backyard, and they don't want to take the fair money that is provided for you when they buy it, the one-term buyout. So this is the real issue, but the hysteria on this pipeline is mind-boggling to me, because if you look at the facts, it brings jobs, it brings energy, it brings manufacturing, it brings more jobs, it brings economic growth to the areas it goes through. Everybody that's in the area that it doesn't go through their backyard wants it. It's going near my backyard. I want it. I just wish that I owned the land that it went on so I could get a check from them. I can just walk on it. The whole thing makes no sense. Shaun, I want to thank you for being with us today. Shaun Kenney, former executive director, Republican Party of Virginia. Shaun, maybe you'll come back and be the RPVED again. What do you think?
We'll see about that.
Shaun Kenney, for executive director of the Virginia Republican Party. Change, my friend, is in the air.